My presentation is on Wonder by Stefan Chbosky. As most of you may or may not know, this film is based on a true story. A little background knowledge is Augie, as you can see, the little boy in the middle wearing the astronaut helmet, has various physical features that allows him not to be the normal looking boy. He faces many challenges along the way, however, that doesn't stop him from being the nice boy that he is. Throughout the entire film, he learns that he can blend in because he was born to stand out. And here in the picture that I inputted is his mother, Isabel Pullman, his father, Nate Pullman, and his sister, Olivia Pullman. Alienation was the first sociological concept that I decided to connect to my film analysis. Alienation could be defined as a theoretical concept that causes isolation, barbarized, or indifferent systems of working within a system. And here I inputted a picture of Augie, which is him eating by himself, and obviously that is someone being alienated because they are isolated from the rest of the community, or as in this picture is his peers. How is it illustrated in the movie? Well, Augie doesn't go to a local school since he is homeschooled by his mother because he feels the need to alienate himself from the rest of the community because he obviously has facial differences. This leads to Augie wearing an astronaut helmet everywhere he goes, whether it be to a store, to a park. Olivia also experiences this because she doesn't get the same attention as Augie does, which causes her to feel alienated. Olivia would always say, "My house was like the earth, it revolved around the sun, not the daughter." And that is a quote that strongly emphasizes alienation because she is showing how her house was basically like the earth and the sun was obviously Augie, and the earth what obviously revolves around Augie. Discrimination is the second sociological concept that I decided to connect to my film analysis. Discrimination is defined as an action that excludes, disadvantages, or differentiates between individuals or a group on the basis of some ascribed or inherited traits. Here I inputted a picture which is showing how there are many types of people that look different ways and how easily some people could be discriminated just because they look a different way or they could be maybe a different race. Here's another picture that I inputted, which is how there are 4 people that look differently and some are accepted and some aren't, which is how discrimination is playing its role in how one of those could potentially be Augie. How is it illustrated in the movie? Well, there is indirect discrimination and direct discrimination. Indirect discrimination is when there's a practice or policy or rule which connects to everyone in the same way, however, it causes a worse effect on others. A way that he experienced this was Julian, which was one of Augie's classmates, photoshopped Augie from the class photo and began to show other people. Later then, Julian put that picture that Augie was cut out of and put it on Augie's locker, which made Augie feel very upset and discriminated by the rest of his peers because he knew that he wasn't accepted. Augie experienced more of the direct discrimination, which is the legal term that applies if you treat someone else less favorably than someone else has been treated because that person has other differences. In Augie's case, it would be his facial differences. A way that Augie experiences this was Augie wanted to sit next to Amos, which was one of his classmates, and Amos refused to let him sit there because it was saved. But in the film, it was not saved. He just didn't want someone like Augie sitting right there. Another way was Julian, a classmate, made fun of him for having a braid on the back of his head, which resulted in Augie cutting that braid off because he felt direct discrimination by Julian. And also, lastly, his favorite holiday was Halloween, so others wouldn't have to see his face because he knew that when he was going to school and he didn't have a mask on, everyone would be looking at him differently, as shown in that picture. But in the film, he wore a mask on the day of Halloween and everyone seemed to say hi to him, so he knew that when he wears a mask, no one looks at him differently since they can't see him. Lastly, the third sociological concept that I connected to my film was achieve status. And an achieve status is a position that is earned or chosen. And in this picture that I inputted is Augie with the rest of his classmates, and those classmates later on in the movie turned out to be his friends, and an achieved status that those friends earned was becoming his friends because they chose to be his friend. Here's also another picture of Jack Well becoming Augie's friend. How is it illustrated in the movie? Well, this sociological concept wasn't potentially shown in the beginning of the film. It was more towards the end, because in the beginning they didn't really accept Augie the way he was. However, Augie won the Henry Ward Beecher Medal because he was the student whose quiet strength has carried up the most hearts. And that was an achieved status for Augie because he chose to be nice to other people even when they weren't nice to him. Another achieved status was with Jack Well, because Jack Well, towards the middle of the movie, became Augie's first friend, and that is an achieved status because Jack Well chose to be Augie's friend rather than him having to be Augie's friend. Another example would be Miranda, which was Olivia's friend, created her own achieved status when she went to a camp and came back completely changed. For example, she dyed her hair, which is an achieved status because she chose to do that. Lastly, the biggest achieved status that happened in this film was they all, and by all I mean his classmates and the rest of this community, learned how to accept Augie even with his facial differences, because they knew that even though he looked different from the rest of the community, he was still a normal boy that went to school. And that is an achieved status since they chose to accept him rather than being forced to accept him. And here in the picture to the right I inputted is how Augie is sitting with the rest of his classmates that chose to be his friends. And on the picture to the left is how Augie stood up in front of that whole classroom setting, and he spoke to those people, and even though they weren't the nicest people to him, he still was nice to them, which was an achieved status, and when he won the Henry Beecher Medal. And that is the end of my presentation.